Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking the bizarre and absolutely beautiful world of Pnex 19's novel, The New Weird Speaks in Spores and Bureaucracy. We're stepping right into the streets of Greyward. This is a city where buildings literally wake up, have full-blown existential crises, and need government paperwork just to survive. It's a fascinating and, honestly, surprisingly emotional look at how we try to document the impossible. Imagine your house needing a therapist, but the therapist is like a municipal filing clerk.
All right, looking at our docket for today, we've got a quick agenda to get through. First, welcome to Greyward. Then, the rules of reality, followed by when buildings wake up. Fourth is the architecture of care. Fifth, the battle for recognition. And we'll wrap things up with making the real official.
Welcome to Greyward, a city where the architecture actually notices you. We are starting our case study right in the thick of a place where an investigator's most powerful tool isn't a weapon or magnifying glass. Nope, it's a narrow-ruled notebook and the correct administrative forms. It's where municipal planning meets metaphysics. Now, this place operates under a totally bizarre condition called a dimensional overlay. What does that actually mean? Well, basically, reality here isn't just unpredictable, it is a constant, ongoing negotiation. You've got multiple, completely incompatible sets of physics and consciousness laws occupying the exact same real estate at the exact same time. It makes the environment wildly unstable. You might step out your front door and suddenly find out that gravity is just a suggestion, or that Tuesday is happening twice. Moving into Section 2, the rules of reality, decoding the three dimensions. Let's break down these totally conflicting rules, because honestly, just going out to get a cup of coffee here requires knowing exactly which laws of physics apply. Navigating this city is just a wild ride depending on where you're standing. Dimension A is Newtonian adjacent, what we're used to. Gravity works, streets are solid, simple enough. But then you have Dimension B, the retrocausal zone. Time moves backward here. So you could get an angry memo from your boss about a mistake you literally haven't even made yet, which sounds incredibly frustrating. But the real kicker for our explainer today is Dimension C, consciousness. In this zone, thoughts actually take physical form, and the concrete environment absorbs and reflects human emotions over decades. Which brings us to Section 3, when buildings wake up, specifically looking at case file 14 Vellum Street. So what actually happens when a city absorbs all that human consciousness for years and finally starts processing it? Well, when the residential building at 14 Vellum Street suddenly wakes up and achieves sentience, its very first thought is, it's going to end. It realizes existence is finite and it completely panics. It starts physically rearranging its internal architecture, literally shifting bathrooms and staircases around because it is wrestling with profound existential dread. Which really begs the question, how on earth do you help a building that is terrified of dying? Do you call a construction crew or a grief counselor? This is where Mira Veldecourt comes in. She's an investigator for the Office of Ontological Consistency, and she handles this impossible grief the only way she knows how, by translating it into a dignified administrative procedure. Step 1, she files Form 1701-D for sentient structure recognition. Step 2, she carefully documents this massive, miraculous 5-story interior garden the building spontaneously grew just to comfort itself. And Step 3, she submits an official acknowledgement of its life. It is literally bureaucracy used as a form of therapy. In her notebook, Mira just writes this beautiful little line, "The building made a garden. I think it counts." And that right there perfectly captures the entire thematic contrast of the story. It's taking this cold, clinical, official lens and applying it to deep emotional care. The building just wanted to know if its existence mattered, and the paperwork proves that, yeah, it did. It turns out a rubber stamp can actually provide incredible comfort when the universe feels too big. All right, Section 4, the architecture of care. Case file, Building A. Now we're shifting from a building's fear of death to its incredible capacity for unprompted, unilateral love. Let's talk about Building A. It's this 60-year-old structure in the Weaver's Quarter. It notices the local neighborhood kids are having a hard time, right? So it actively and secretly diverts nutrients through an underground mycelial network to comfort them. The ground literally held them like a mother's hand. It's a staggering display of empathy. But because no good deed goes unpunished, this beautiful act violated shared resource consent laws, landing the poor building in the interspecies court for unauthorized redistribution of municipal assets. And during that trial, the building's translator drops this incredibly heartbreaking line. It was embarrassed to make a formal request to be allowed to care. That felt wrong, like asking permission to feel something. This highlights a massive gap in Greyward's legal system. Bureaucracy is built to manage competition. It tells you what you can't take. But it has absolutely zero framework to legislate a pure, unilateral gift. Asking the government for permission to love its community completely defeated the purpose for the structure. That brings us to Section 5, the battle for recognition, the bureaucracy of consciousness. Because those underground chemical signals of care, they are spreading. It's no longer just building A anymore. A slow wave of sentience is moving right through the city's network. The chemical signals propagated, effectively waking up the neighbors. Now we're looking at 12 distinct emergence cases in the Weavers' Quarter alone, 4 in the Merchants' Quarter, and 2 in the Old Core. The city is waking up in mass, and it has a lot of feelings. So the local government is backed into a corner, leading to a huge clash between two opposing bureaucratic frameworks. One faction, Mirror's Office of Ontological Consistency, is saying, hey, let's grant these buildings official citizenship and recognize them as members of the community. But the Department of Impossible Geography takes a much harder line. They want to classify them as Category 3 realities, basically viewing the sentience as a dangerous instability that needs to be strictly quarantined and walled off. Well, the newly awake buildings aren't just going to accept a quarantine. They band together and submit Form 901-A, a collective petition beautifully arguing for their right to exist. They write, know that we were always there. Know that the care was always real. File the form that makes it official. They've spent decades silently sheltering humanity, and they make it absolutely clear that their silence was never an absence of care. They just want that love put on the record. Moving into our final section, Section 6, making the real official, the act of noticing. Let's tie this seemingly dry act of administrative form-filling directly to the philosophy of love. This entire ethos is perfectly captured in a quote from Gerald Foss, found in another of the author's novels. He writes, "To attend carefully to the things that are present and true and being collectively not noticed, and to document same." This is the absolute core argument of our story today. Taking the time to notice the overlooked and carefully documented isn't just bureaucratic red tape. It is literally the highest form of care. It's how we honor reality. Now, bureaucracy turns incredibly slowly, but it does turn. Look how long the path to citizenship takes. In year 0, the memo arrives, and thankfully the quarantine proposal gets rejected. It takes 9 long years for the city charter to finally be amended to grant these buildings architectural citizenship. But skip ahead, and the administrative wait is totally worth it. By year 40, the Hell Garden spans 5 floors, and these impossibilities have been beautifully integrated into everyday life. The paperwork finally caught up with the reality. 40 years later, Mira can just sit quietly in that thriving sanctuary, cultivated by a building that realized the answer to its paralyzing fear of death wasn't to panic, but to simply create a safe place for frightened people. And that massive act of creation, that profound act of architectural empathy, was forever protected by the paperwork Mira filed. Which leaves us with a truly provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up. Think about the spaces you inhabit every single day. If the walls around you could finally speak, what acts of silent care would they ask you to make official? Really, how much silent love are we walking past, perfectly woven into our environment, just waiting to be noticed and put on the record? Thanks so much for exploring Greyward with me today. Keep noticing the world around you.